Good morning, Rabbi.
All right, Danielle, thanks for the pics. Got them all.
Amazing. I already sent from
today,
Sunday, second shiur.
There's really very little left. There's just, I think, 3 DAF. I mean, every now and then, but not like this.
Mm-hmm.
For every few lines, this is just a little bit more. All right, my fellow Jews, let's go. Freilach. Get my setalach. Can you already get this up, Danny?
A second.
With the help of Hashem, we are learning ERUVIN DAF Yud. We are continuing to learn the din of Nira mibachutz v'shava mibafnin. And as we began on DAF Tes Amid Beis, let's go back to Rabbi Barafuna. He opines, thank you for the picture up there, that Nira mibachutz v'shava mibafnin is considered a lechi. And on that, we brought a question from the Mishnah DAF Tzadik Beis, and this is the Mishnah DAF Tzadik Beis. We wanted to understand why is it that one may not carry in the small chatzir. It has a lechi that is visible mibachutz. It's visible from the chatzir gedolah. And in order for him to take away that question, this is where we left off. He needed to say 3 things. Only when you have all 3 together does it make sense. Number 1, Rab Zera, as you see in the picture, that the walls of the inner smaller chatzir, they protrude into the outer chatzir. So that takes away the lechis altogether. Number 2, that Ravina says that the case of the Mishnah, and as the Braisa added, giving us the dimensions, that the larger chatzir is a total of 1 amma wider than the smaller chatzir. But it's not pshat that the smaller chatzir is exactly in the center of 1 amma is comprised of 6 tfachim. It's not that there are 3 tfachim on each side. That also wouldn't work to answer the question. Because even if you would go with Rav Zera, that the walls go into the large chatzir, why would we not say lavud? As we explained, if it's 3 ammas on each side, the wall eats up some of those ammas. So really the gap is less than 3 tfachim, you say lavud. So the answer was, it goes like Ravino, which is already a little bit of a doichik, that it's dafke not aligned. So emes, one side, let's say, has 2 tfachim. Here you have lavud. And based on the rule that we're saying, L'shitas Rabba Barafuna, Nira mibachutz v'shava mibafnin, this will be a lechi for the chatzir ha'ktana. But since the other side has 4, the wall eats up a little bit. So what? But you still have 3 tvachim or more. You don't have less than 3 tvachim. There is no lavud, so there is no lechi from the second side. But still, it's not enough. Why is it not enough? Who cares if there's no lechi from the second side? There is 1 lechi. So for that, we had on top of Dayud, it also must follow Shitas Rabbi, that when it comes to a chatzir needs to have 2 pasin, a chatzir needs to have 2 lechis, 1 is not enough. This is where we left off. What we're going to continue today is to really refute all that. First of all, we're going to speak about a shita of Rabbi Yossi. Really, there's a machlokes we're going to have later between Rabbi Yossi and the Chachamim. How wide does a lechi have to be b'chlal? Whether it's by a mavoi, whether it's by a chatzir. It is Rabbi Yossi that holds that a lechi has to be 3 tvachim. The Chachamim hold that a lechi can be any width, even a much garnished, a little width. It's also a good lechi. And we're going to show you that the Mishnah that we just quoted has to go by Rabbi Yossi. And as we'll explain, it's not going to work out that well. Really, the Gemara is going to hold that the Mishnah, the way the Braisa explains it, the Braisa added that nuance, that the larger chatzir is a full amma larger than the smaller chatzir. Based on that, actually the Mishnah will come out to be a refutation of the sheet of Rabba Barafuna. It really doesn't matter. We'll see later. We can still pass in that way. We're going to finally come back to the Mishnah on Daf Beis. The second thing we learned in the first Mishnah in the Masechta was what happens if the width of the entrance to the Mavoi is more than 10 amas. So then we learned that a lechi and a koide would not suffice, but you have to have Tzuras HaPesach, and Tzuras HaPesach will suffice, or you have to decrease it. And the question will be exactly how you decrease it. We're going to learn in ERUVIN the first time the din of Pasei Birois. We spoke about Pasei Birois when we learned Shabbos. Bisman Habayis, when Yidden from Babel went to the Eretz Yisrael, as we should, Aliyah Saregel, it was very common that they spend Shabbos on the side of the road, on the way going to Yerushalayim. And in order for people to have water, they built public wells on the sides of the roads. Problem is that since the opening of the well was more than 4 by 4 tfachim, and the walls going down into the ground were 10 tfachim or more, which means that the water that was in the well was in a halachic reshus hayachid. We were standing in a reshus harabim. How can you bring water up from the well into the area around the well? So the Chachamim were very lenient, and they allowed for us to employ some sort of what we call enclosing boards, as we will explain, and that will create the area inside the Pasei Birois as a Reshus Hayachid. We're going to learn various scenarios, again, of reducing the width of a mavui. We're going to go into greater detail today about this din of oimed meruba ala paretz versus paretz meruba ala oimed. And what about if it's exactly the same, the standing part of the wall, the breached part of the wall have the same size, how that will affect various halachas. And finally, if we'll have time, what we clearly learned in the Mishnah on DAF base is that Atzuras HaPesach resolves an opening that is wider than 10. We also learned on DAF Gimel that a maltera, that means a prominence, that means some sort of beautiful protruding designs that is on top of a koida, resolves a koida that is higher than 20 amas, allowing it to function. It works. The Gemara's question is going to be, what happens if we will reverse these solutions, as we'll explain the question. In other words, can Atzuras HaPesach resolve if the koida is above 20 amas? Can a amaltera resolve a opening that's wider than 10 amas? Nevertheless, since there's an amaltera on top of the koida, question is, will that be a good solution or not? And a lot more. We left off the last word of the second line from the top of the Amud on Daf Yud. Again, guys, we gave a good review to Halkov over here. All right, the sheet of Rabbi Baravua, Nidim Bachutz V'fnin, Nidain Lechi. The question that we have from the Mishnah Daf Tzadik Beis, and the 3 steps, Rab Zera, Ravina, and Rabbi, that allowed this Mishnah not to contradict the Halach. Says the Gemara, I reject this whole theory, I reject this whole approach. Keep the picture up in your minds. That guys, don't forget, you can carry in the Chatzah Gedolah. No one debates that, because when you stand inside the Chatzah Gedolah, you have 4 walls, mamish 4 walls. The one on the back, the one on the side, the one on the side. The one in the front, each side of it has a little bit. And since, like we mentioned already a few times, that the opening between the Chatzah Gedolah and the Katana is not wider than 10 amas, it's not a pirza, so it's considered a bona fide wall. The Chatzah Katana, it's flush. If we're going to go that it's Einanida Mishulachi, Amachaya, that's why you can't carry in there. And let's add another nuance, which, as we'll explain in a moment, will explain why the Braisa says that the Chatzah Gedolah is 11 amas, the width, and the Chatzah Katana is 10 amas, that the Rebbe Savala, Ke Rabbi Yosi, that Rebbe holds like Rabbi Yosi. Rabbi Yosi holds, my friends, that a lechi is only a lechi if it has at least 3 tfachim of width. In order for you to be allowed to carry in the Chatzah Gedolah, I get it that the breach is not wider than 10 amas, but you have to have, according to Rabbi Yosi, a minimum size wall on each side. And since Rabbi Yosi holds the minimum is 3 tfachim, that's why he said, the Braisa says that the Mishnah is saying that the Chatzah Gedolah is 11 amas, the Chatzah Katana is 10 amas, and yes, the Chatzah Katana is exactly centered in the middle, which means that on each side you have 3 tfachim, which is the minimum size wall, which will be matir, you carrying in the Chatzah Gedolah. And I'm going to, very okay, say that. And therefore, with the Rab Zera or the Ravina Lessa, I don't need to go with Rab Zera and Ravina. There's no need for it. Okay. Mishumach, again, all of this will explain why we have this dimension of the Braisa. Mishumach, Ktana Be'eser, Gedolah Ba'achat Asrei. It's all about explaining why you could carry in the Chatzah Gedolah. because the author of the Mishnah Rebbe will hold like Rabbi Yossi. And if you would not have on each side 3 tfachim, then you would not have enough of a wall for you to allow carrying in the Chatzer Gedolah. And you don't have to say that the walls from the Chatzer Katana protrude in. There's no issue of lavud. Bechlal, the whole lechi doesn't function for the Chatzer Katana, because in the Chatzer Katana you cannot see it. But if you want to insist, Eli Yominat, no, that neither mibachutz v'shavim b'fnin, neither mishum lechi. And then the kasha is, well, the Chatzer Katana also has a lechi noch on both sides. And the only way you got around it was saying, number one, that the walls of the Chatzer Katana go into the Chatzer Gedolah, at Rav Zayda. But then you had a new question, so what? Lavud. So for that, you needed to speak out, Ravina, that it's not aligned. And if that would be the case, if it's not aligned, that means that one side is small. One side is 2 tfachim, we said. One side doesn't even have 3 walls, which means the Rebbe will not hold like Rabbi Yossi. Rebbe is going to hold that any amount of wall is good enough. So the Gemara asks a pashta kasha. Now it's interesting, my friends, that the kasha is not on the Mishnah itself. The kasha is, we are taking for granted that the Braisas informing us that the case of the Mishnah is that the larger chatzir is 11 amos wide. The smaller chatzir is 10 amos wide, azoy yidos. It's not one opinion. But the question is, why would we have to say that? Kasha is that why did we have to say that the large one is 11 amas? If it's in order if it's to make, if it's to allow you to carry in the Gedolah, the guys, the Shita, the Chachamim against Rabbi Yossi holds that a lechi doesn't have a minimum amount. So then be'eser ushnei tfachim sagya. It's very important. 2 tfachim is lav dafka. It can be less than 2 tfachim. Any amount would have been enough. In other words, as long as there is some little bit of wall by the Gedolah, then it's good enough for you to carry in the Gedolah. Eloma, it's not to explain why you can carry in the Gedolah. The Ila Meisra Liktana Kasi, if we're trying to point out that what? That you're not allowed to carry in the inside. In other words, it would be a lot clearer had you made the larger chatzir even more than 11, not giving exactly 3 by 3. You don't need to do that. If you're going to say that it's not centered, and if it's not centered, you need to have a lechi from both sides. And therefore, you only have, like we said, so who needs all that? Guys, the wider the outer one is, right? No matter where you put the middle one, not only will you not have, like Rebbe says on Papara Ahmed, passing from both sides, you won't have passing from any sides. Because the moment you can't say love it, and you have to sign like Rav Zayda, that the walls, as you can see in the picture up here, the walls of the inner chutzner, they go into the outer chutzner. When they go into the outer chutzner, then then you don't say that there's a nida mibachutz. There's no nida mibachutz. I'm a chaya. Who needs to make it so precise that you have a problem, but still there's lavud, then you have to put it on a line? Don't do all that. It makes things complicated. By the fact that the Braisa says that the outer Chatzer Gedolah is 11, all of that leads us, the reason for that would be that measurement is to help you with Rebbe, help you with Rabbi Yossi, help you explain not why you can't carry in the Katana, why you could carry in the Gedolah, because you have to have a lechi that's at least 3 tfachim. And therefore, the way you get to a lechi of 3 tfachim is dafke when it's 11, not less. When it's 11, one amma extra, 6 tfachim extra, divided into half, 3 and 3. So because of all of this, Elolaf Shmamina, not like Rabba Barafuna, that needed me bachutz, Einoi needed mishum lechi, Shmamina. Wow. Now don't think just because the Gemara concluded this way that he was not refuted. And we're going to actually see Allah Lamaisa that many people do consider a nida mibachutz b'shavim b'afnim. It is considered a bona fide lechi. I just want to link this topic very much, just to repeat what we said at the beginning of yesterday's shiur, al pi Hasidus, al pi Kabbalah, that when we're speaking about the structure of how people lived, for sure the inner house is a more the shus hayachid. So the oilum is Hatzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Nasiya. So the concept here will be is that for whom are we putting up these reminders? From the people on the inside or from the people on the outside? If you say that Nira mibachutz, v'shava mibafnim, it is a lechi, l'chu'ura, this indicates that the ikir positioning of the koira or of the lechi is that the people on the outside should not, when they see inside, learn from anything. And therefore, it's taka good. This is really the machlokes. For who are you primarily putting it? For the ones inside or for the ones outside? And the ones that need to have the most reminders, that should make sense, are from us. The ones who are in this olam hazeh, we are the ones that are the most confused. And if we have our heker, then this will be good enough, right, to separate the Rosh Hashanah from the mavui, or here in our case, the outer yard from the inner yard. Okay. Amalei Abaya. I'm sorry. Amar Rabbi Yosef. Now, guys, let's appreciate that Rabbi Yosef was a Talmud of Rav Huna. The statement that we learned was Rabba bar Rav Huna. Everyone knows that the Rabba bar Rav Huna says Nirim Bachutz, the Shavim Efnim is yes, it's a good lechi, and his whole doichlik of how the Mishnah did not contradict him. So Rabbi Yosef is saying that Lo Shemi Li Hoishmaitza. I never heard this from Rav Huna. In other words, what Rabbi Yosef is saying is that had I heard it from your father, had I heard it from Rav Huna, I would have accepted it. With all the kashas we have in the Mishnah, we can find the answer. But I never heard it from him, so I'm not going to accept it. And as we find many times in Shas, B'chlal Rabbi Yosef, who got ill, during his illness, he forgot some of his learning. And his Talmud Abaye would respectfully remind his teacher Rabbi Yosef what Rabbi Yosef taught Abaye. So now Rabbi Yosef is beginning from the premise, since I never heard this from the father, I'm not going to accept it from Rabbi. So Amalei Abaye, no, it's not true. That you Rabbi Yosef, you in the past told us this din in the name of Rav Huna, and therefore you should agree to it. And on this, Rabbi is reminding him, when did Rabbi Yosef speak about this din? The guys, the first white line in DAF Yud, the Amar Rami bar Abba, Amar Rav Huna. This is all what Rabbi Yosef taught Abaye. Lechi hamoishech im defanoi shel mavoi. If you have a lechi, and the lechi again is flush. Guys, here we have the two pictures for it. We spoke about these cases before. Anyone will be good enough. The lechi is not inside the mavui at all. No, the lechi is completely outside the mavui. It's outside the mavui. Either it's more towards one side of the wall, or it's more, very good, one picture, or it's in the inside. In both pictures, diagram A and diagram B, you're going to see that this, when you are standing inside the mavui, there is no protrusion at all of a lechi. This is a classical case of nira mi bachutz. If you're standing in the Rosh Hashanah, you see that there's a lechi, but it's shava mi bafnim. So here, there's another nuance that Rav Huna was addressing. If the length of this board is less than 4 ames, then nidai mishum lechi. Clearly, like his son said, like Rabbi bar Rav Huna. Here Rav Huna himself is saying, as long as you have a nira mi bachutz, you got a good lechi, and you can carry in the mavi. Another detail, until what point can you carry? If you're going from the inside of the mavi to outside the Rosh Hashanah, until what point can you carry? Up until the inner edge. In other words, you may not carry opposite the lechi. However, the moment this lechi that's protruding further out into the Rosh Hashanah is 4 ames or more, since he holds that the minimum size of a mavi is 4 ames, do you know what this board is considered? It's considered a wall of a mavi because it has the minimum depth of a mavi. A wall of a mavi is not a lechi. Dalad ames, neither mishum mavi. And therefore, it's not matir the mavi at all. So first of all, Abaye is telling him that you quoted this Rami bar Abba Amar Rav Huna. And on that you said, and va'at amrat lana lan. Then after you quoted this, then you said shlamina tlas, shlamina bein lichoyayin asid, because it says you can only carry im chudei apnimi. You said shlamina that meshach mavui. Meshach mavui means the minimum depth of a mavui is not like we learned in the beginning of the Masechta Shita that only 4 tfachim. No, it has to be 4 ames. Bishmamina, clearly, that nida mibachutz, even though it's Rafnim, nida mishum lechim. So now that Abaye reminded Rabbi Yosef Taka also accepted this din as dachuk as it is, as we just pointed out. Why would the Braisa have to say 11:10? Okay. Nevertheless, this din stands. And the hilchaseh, nida mibachutz, the shavim mibafnim, nida mishum lechim. And now the Gemara has a gewaldige one-liner. Teyufta ve'ilchaseh. We had a teyufta. The teyufta again wasn't directly from the Mishnah. It was the fact that the Braisa needed to tell us that the Chatzar Achitza Gedoyla had 11 amas. It would have been better had we given a bigger number. Why 11? And even though it was so to say from that, it comes out better that it's not a lechi, as we explained. And the Mishnah is really following Rabbi Yossi, and yet you paskin that way. So the word says, yeah. Mishum the Tani Rab Chia Kavose on the Testament Veis, Rab Chia had another brayse that clearly says that nida mibachutz v'shavim mibafnim, yes, nida mishum lachi. Now, guys, this is a very important klal when we learn the Gemara. Whenever the Gemara comes with a tiyufta, not kasha tiyufta, and in the era of the Gemara nothing else was spoken about, then everyone is going to reject that shita because the Gemara said it was tiyufta, it was agishlagin. But whenever in the Gemara itself there appears to be a checkmate question, and by the way, the Gemara doesn't even use the words tiyufta, but we understand this now to be a tiyufta. If the Gemara itself nevertheless doesn't reject that shita, then we don't have to paskin based on the rejection of that shita. Tiyufta is a statement for us after the time of the Gemara. In the times of the Shas, yes, the Gemara is saying you can have a tiyufta type of question, and nevertheless we can still conclude likewise here because we found the Braisa that's right before Rafuna that says this thing. And now we are going back to that Beis Amadal. The Mishnah there gave us two dinim. It gave us the maximum height of a koira, above which the koira doesn't function. The halal cannot be more than 20 amas. The Mishnah then gave us the harachav, that the width, the opening going into the mavui can only be 10. If it's a little bit wider than 10, in other words, we could have a chalal of 10, but if it's wider than 10, yima'et. Okay, so now says the Gemara, Omer Abaye, Zok Abaye, Can we learn in the Braisa, V'harachov me'eser yimayit. In our Mishnah, in the first case of the Mishnah, where we were speaking about the maximum height, Rabbi Yehuda was more lenient. He allows for a mavui to become permitted through a koida, even though the koida is above 20 amas. When it comes to the second in of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda did not opine. However, in a Braisa we learned this in the days, that Rabbi Yehuda also argues over here. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Eino Tzarech Lamayit, because even though it's more than 10 amas, no problem. It's not called a pirza. Now, the at kama is something that we don't have in the Braisa. If you remember that based on the sugya there, it should come out that since the shita was it's mishum Pesach, and Rabbi Yehuda learns it from the Pesach of the Ulam, and the Pesach of the Ulam was 40 amas tall and it was 20 amas wide, the chudah would come out that the at kama up until 20 amas. For some reason, the Gemara here rejects it. The Gemara doesn't accept that at all. I don't know if we spoke it out then, but quickly going back on that Beis Amid Beis, towards the end of the Amid Abayim, when the Gemara says Amid Abayim, that Rabbi Yehuda in the Braisa argues with the Tanakama and allows it to be bigger, Places already points out that l'chora, based on the sugya, it should come out that Rabbi Yehuda should hold you tolerate an opening until 20 amas, tischai shel ulam. But the Gemara over here, he just asks. The Gemara over here doesn't go by that. The Gemara wants to know about kama. So Savar Rabbi Achi Kamei Rabbi Yosef Lemeimar Ad Shleish Esrei Ama Ushlish. You allow an opening of 13 amas and a third of an amma, and not more. And where do we get that 13 and a third? So here, guys, you're gonna have to suffer with my picture. A painting over here. We're gonna learn about this in the beginning of the next page. Don't worry. So we're gonna bring this closer to here. And then for the Chabad.org camera, Daf Machen Dom, Daf Machen Dorten. So guys, my grace is smiley circle in the middle. That's the well. Like we mentioned in the introduction. You're going to Yerushalayim. You got stuck, not stuck. For Shabbos, you stopped on the side of the road. You have to have water. So there are public wells. Everything around here is a Reshus HaRabim. When it comes to a Reshus HaYachid, the Reshus HaYachid is not a mechitza. What's a Reshus HaYachid? 4 mechitzas, right? Or 3 mechitzas, but midrabanan 4 mechitzas that encircle an area of 4 by 4 tfachim or more. Every mechitza is 10 tfachim or more. Right? The well, inside the well is a Reshus HaYachid. Because if the well goes down 10 tfachim, and not the circumference, if you were to measure the width and the length of the well, of the circle, it's 4 by 4 tfachim or more, and that was a classical measurement of a well, then the waters in there are laying in a Reshus HaYachid. So how do you take the waters out? So they were very lenient. They allow you to take boards. Guys, you see these 4 boards that I designed over here? It's like L-shaped, right angles. Maybe you'll have to add some more. We'll learn this more in the second Perek. Now you have tremendous amount of space in between them. You have here more paruts than oimid. Normally, if it's more paruts than oimid, it's mavatal the mechitzas. They were lenient. All of the area inside my box, which is a place in which you can easily bring in animals and take out animals because you have large gaps in between the L's, that is considered a Reshus HaYachid, pasiv. Now, really, we're going to learn a machlekes between Rab Meir and Rab Yehuda. How much of a gap do we tolerate? Rab Yehuda says that we tolerate up until 13 1/3. That's where we have the 13 1/3. So now the Gemara here is applying that din over here. What's the Kal V'chomer back in the Gemara? Right by the little star. We had a leniency there, even though there are more breach, more gap than wall, than standing wall. Nevertheless, it's okay. However, Rabbi Yehuda holds that there is a maximum gap larger than that. The passive does not work. And what is that again? Rabbi Yehuda, we're going to learn Rab Meir noch tomorrow before the second page. But that's going to be 13 amas and a third amma. So we don't have such a heter. When you have a mavi, if there's so many breaches in the wall, not that they are all together more than 10 amas. Even like the Tanach, they never amount to more than 10 amas in one place. But when you sum total them all, you have more breach than wall. The whole mavi is not it becomes a cardinalist. You may not carry there. That is the logic that he brought over here. And the Gemara has various counters to it. It's amazing how we're going to learn all different types of svaras. Minakotza, elakotza, all of them are equally going to refute the Kal V'chomer. Says the Gemara, no, because I can argue mamish adarabah or v'hi anesenes. Since they made it one leniency, they can't tolerate more than one leniency. So therefore, so when it comes to the gap in between these boards, they made relatively a chomordika limit. But over here by Yamavui, on the opposite, since we don't tolerate paras from alignment, so therefore, if we're machman on one hand, we can afford to be lenient on the other hand. How much yosef? The Gemara doesn't say. But again, let's go back maybe up until 20 hours, because by the gap, the width of the Pesach of the Ulam was 20. You know, we find this by an Aguna, right? We're mekel b'tchilasa, and in many other areas. That's one way we can refute the Kal V'chomer. Inami, we can refute it mamish the opposite. Once you see that Chazal were lenient, so they were lenient in A, they can be lenient in B. We already know that Chazal were lenient, since we know clearly the Akilat Buhu Chat Kula, which is that they tolerate Parutz Meruba Ala Oimid, which is an exception. So maybe Akal Buhu Kula Achlina, which is what that they allow you the opening to be even up until 13.3. But maybe a Mavui, Klava Klava. Klava Klava means that since we know by a Mavui where a Parutz Meruba Ala Oimid invalidates carrying in the Mavui, maybe the heter of the gap of the width will be less than that. Okay, so therefore, we refuted the Kal V'chomer, and here it's unresolved. We don't know Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, and that's the Kashan Toisos, the base on the base. Why wouldn't the Gemara here say, oh, it must be up until 20 amas, for the same reason Rabbi Yehuda learns that the height is up until 40. But don't forget, if you remember that Maskana, there were different angles over there. We also found the Baraisa that Rabbi Yehuda tolerates 40, 50, 100. Remember that? And based on that, it's like an Afmin Kischa Shalulam. And maybe that's why we still have an open-ended question. Says the Gemara. And now we're starting with all different types of solutions. Now the Chachamim, the most that you can have an opening is 10 amas. What happens if it's larger? What do you need to do? What do you need to do? Says the Gemara, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid. Levi had a braisa. All you need to do is all you need to do is to stick into the ground. As you see over here, a kana. And my friend, of a couple of details, the kana has to be 10 tfachim high, and it's in the center. And if you measure each side, you're gonna have a gap of 10 or less, vidayoy, and you're good to go. However, who tanilam, even though Levi was the one that quoted that draisa, but Levi himself rejects that. And he says the ein halacha ka'isa Mishnah. And the question will be why? Look at the picture, it's so beautiful. Why would it not work? So guys, we're learning a klal. ERUVIN DAF Yud. Look inside the last Rashi, the bottom line in the Amid. We have to remember this for the next part of the Amid. Ein halacha ka'isa Mishnah. Look, the asa avira da haigisa, the uda haigisa, umevatale lekana. In other words, that this standing segment, right, this kana that's standing up, becomes nullified, legally, halachically nullified. You know why? Because the open space from both sides are wider than the kana. These are the words. Clearly, everyone does this, everyone agrees to this, and that's why Levi rejects the Brais. Since
it's opposite Lovut.
Let me just figure the gap of both sides of the kana is wider than the kana itself. Now, how wide is the kana? Let's say a tefach. It doesn't matter. And look, the gap both on the right and on the left are 10 amas. So it's so much. It's not paritz menuv al oimid. It's much more than that. The gaps on both sides are so large that halachically we ignore the kana. Now we're going to have to deal with this Rashi to understand the Gemara further. So now, Ikeda Amri, that Omar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi, not Levi himself, same concept. The Ein Halacha Ka'isa Mishnah, like we have in the Rashi. Avira da Haigisa, and they have to add these words that are larger, they're greater, they're wider than each side is wider. That's why it's Mavatal, the standing wall. It's as if it's not there. So now we're back
to the same idea of Lovut, but in the opposite way.
I can't hear you.
It's the same idea of Lovut, but in the opposite way.
Interesting. The same idea of love in an opposite way. Okay, I don't mind those words. So now Omar, guys, this is so amazing. Omar Shmuel Mishmei de Levi, Chavre Daf Yudam Beis. Here we go. Option number 1. If you can see the picture, we don't have a kana. We have much more than a kana. We have a wall that goes into the mavui. You see, the wall that goes into the mavui, as we keep on learning, there is a minimum size of a mavui. Even if we're going to go to the larger shiur of 4 amas, this wall covers a space that is qualified as a mavui per se. So this is called a koisel of a mavui. The koisel of the mavui won't be nullified. The rule that we learned in Rashi, the asa avira mahaigis of mavatel, it's not mavatel a wall, it's mavatel a kana. That always a paskavoy asari, and always has to be high 10 tvachim. And here is the addition, the neshach arba amas. It goes in 4 amas. In under the vet, it's a standalone mavui or koisel of a mavui. And now umamidoy la ar koisel mavui. Oh, and here we're good. Okay. A mavui wall cannot be nullified. Option number 1. Inami, and now we're going to get the fun. Okay, that's good, but we have another option, and there's a big chiddush in this new option. The din is like Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Rabbi Yehuda, mavui shurach av 15 amma. For mavui is 15 amas wide. Now, if you remember, Amad Aleph, we were speaking about a mavui that's 20 amas wide. We'll come back to that in a moment. If it's 15 amas wide, so listen, my friends, listen to the way we're thinking. we only have to resolve 5 amas. This is the Yesoid. Why do we only have to resolve 5 amas? Because since halacha tolerates a gap up until and including 10 amas, we look at that gap as if it's a Pesach, it's an entranceway. So it doesn't bother me that it's open. The only area that is ruining it is 5 amas. So we are looking at the left 5 amas as a standalone issue with a standalone solution. So what do? Marchik, now guys, look at the left wall. Go to the left wall. Right, the right wall in the picture, you're nothing to worry about. Right, the 10 amas is a Pesach to a Mavui. You go to the left side, first leave a gap of 2 amas. Marchik shtei amas. Then put a pas. The pas doesn't go in the mavui. The pas is on the width of the mavui. The pas, this board, is not allowing you. It's blocking the entrance to the mavui, and the pas has to have 3 amas of width. Why are we giving these dimensions, Chevra? I'll tell you why. Because since we have the luxury of only looking at the 5 amas to the left as a standalone area, we always have to have oimed meruba ala parutz. Now, if you look at the picture without understanding the halacha, you would say, the board is only 3 amas, the opening is 15 amas. Come on, it's parutz meruba ala oimed. Well, das balabatim hepach das Torah. Forget about the 10. The 10 is a Pesach. You have now an excess of 5 amas. As long as these 5 amas has more closed than opened, so it's oimed meruba ala parutz, then you're good. And guys, the 2 is not 2 tfachim, it's 2 amas. There's no lavud here. Point is that all you need right now is 1 lechi. And as he put it in the picture here on the right, in other words, there isn't a gap of more than 10 amas. Why not? Because we view the 5 amas as closed. Not lavud closed. People can enter through the 2 amas, but it's oimin merum ala parutz. It's walled off, and now you have an opening of 10. Well, for the opening of 10, you have yourself a lechi. Now, guys, even though we spoke about 20, so I just want to show you the same logic of Rabbi Yehuda will go by 20. Same logic, which is like this: the 110 gap, you're good. You only have to deal with a gap of 10. So to deal with a gap of 10, all you need is to have a pas that blocks roiv. So 6 and 4. So leave a gap of 4. See over here? And then you have 6 that is covered with the pas. Same concept. So the 10 on this side is resolved by having majority blocked. Exactly, that's the picture. And the same concept. And all you need is 1 lechi. So says the Gemara. And now we're going to have a lot of very interesting challenges on this solution. So this is the solution of Rabbi Yehuda. There's nothing wrong with it. We're not going to slug this up, but we're going to ask, why didn't Rabbi Yehuda why didn't we find a better solution? Better would mean that when you have a mavui, you want the minimum of the mavui to be blocked. Here, you have a pas in your face. You have a 3 almond white pas that's blocking you to enter. If there would be a halachic solution that would allow you to leave more open, or at least the pas should be broken into pieces, so there should be more, at least little entrances, that's considered the better option. And now we're going to go through a series of steps until we're almost going to checkmate this answer. But we're going to still stand at the end with it. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the top of the Amid. Why do we need to have only this solution that's up on the screen, that's here in the picture? I have another solution. Again, this is an option. I have a better option. Yasa pas amo. Start with a pas that's 1 amo. Pas amo machza. Pas amo machza. The yarchik shtei amas. The yasa paso machza. See that picture? Now, here you also have same logic. The 10 to the right, we can afford to ignore. That's a Pesach. You only have to solve the 5 amas to the left. We need to have parutz meruba la'oimet. Okay. You know, I'll have parts of the If you look over here in the picture, you'll see that if you put together the 1.5 and a 1.5, that's 3 boards. How much is the opening? Only 2. You have more closed than open. It's actually good. And for some reason, the Gemara finds the flow of traffic nicer this way than in the first solution that we gave. So why didn't we give this as a solution? And therefore, we're trying to extrapolate the following. Is it that Shema Mina, that Oimed Meruba ala Paretz Mishtei Ruches Lehava Oimed? Perhaps, if you're only looking at the left 5 amas, and you have to have Oimed Meruba ala Paretz. If you look at the picture, you'll chap that the gap is how wide? 2. How wide is each pass? Only 1.5. True, if you combine them together, you have 3 closed and 2 open. But maybe, as we'll learn later, there's a shita that says you can't combine them. Notice we need to have for each pass, each board itself has to be larger than the gap. And the fact that Rabbi Yehuda didn't give this, so to say, better solution for the flow of traffic, could we understand that he holds that if each pass per se is narrower than the gap, we do not combine them? So no. That maybe we will follow that you do combine them. We would consider the left 5 amas as oimed meruba ala paretz. The reason why we didn't give the solution, the shani hache. Let's go back to the last line on DAF Yud Amud Aleph. Guys, take a look at not the board that's touching the wall. Don't look at that board. Look at the second board. If you're going from left to right, the second board. How much space do you have open to the right? 10 amas. How much space do you have open to its left? 2 amas. Both of these gaps are larger than the width of the board. So it's mabatal the mechitze, gavaldi. Shani achid, yosevim ha'igisa, lavim ha'igisa mabatalei. Now, based on this answer, now we're going to start pushing the limits because we're going to find a question that you won't be able to respond with this. That why don't we yase lo pas ama begin by 1 ama board and the yarchik ama, gap and ama, the yasa pas ama board number 2, and again the yarchik ama, the yasa pas ama. And what do we have over here? Guys, only look at the 5 to the left. You have a total of 5 amas. How much of the 5 amas is closed? 3. Oimid is meruba ala paretz. And now you see, yes, if you look at the board, the last board, the board which is the closest to the center, on one side, you have a 10 amas opening. But on the other side, how much opening do you have? You don't have an opening that's more than the pas. So it should not be mevatalit. So why didn't you give that solution? Is Shema Mina, maybe there's another extrapolation. Do you know why you didn't give the solution? Because
extrapolate.
Each board itself has to be larger than the gap itself, than each gap. No, it's not only does the sum total have to be more standing than paretz, which you have, but each board itself has to be larger than the gap. Here, truth be told, the gap, the paretz is not meruba al ha'oimed, but the oimed is not meruba al paretz. It's the same. So can we extrapolate Shema Mina that oimed kip paretz is also not good? So I want to know. Oimed kip paretz is good. It's only problematic if the paretz is meruba al oimed. The shana hache, even though the ear space to the left of the board is not more than the board, but we still got a problem. Because the ear space to the right is 10 amas. The ear space, the paretz to the right is much bigger than the board. The ear space to the left is not less than the board. That's also mavatal the board. Right, because it's equal is also mavatal. So that's why he didn't give this option. And now we're going to go to the checkmate question. Guys, the final other option that he should have given, the yarchik ama, you should begin when you're going from left to right, begin with a gap. Don't begin with the wall. Leave a gap of 1. And only then v'yasa pas ama umechza. Then v'yarchik only 1 ama. V'yasa pas ama umechza. Now my friends, look what happened over here. Look at any board, right? Even the board towards the center. The board is talking narrower than the gap to the right because 1.5 is less than 10, but 1.5 is more than 1. So here, there's nothing to be mevatel the mechitza. And we're going with the premise that this would be a better way of solving the mavui. So the Gemara says, ein hachinami, that he could have given that solution. Elama, the kulahai, the reason why the Gemara gave the solution of Rabbi Yehuda, which is this solution, is because you know what? Here, you only have to put up 1 board. Here, it's like a functions. You got to put up 2 boards just for that. So they gave this would work, but they gave you a solution that's easier to do. Says the Gemara, the Lechoish, Dilma Shavik Pischa Rabba Ba'al Pischa Zuta. Let's go back over here to Rabbi Yehuda's solution. Guys, where is there a lechi? Where is there a lechi? Only 1 lechi. Where is the lechi? All the way to the right. But hold on. If people are going to enter the 2 amma gap to the left, there's no lechi at all. Guys, don't forget that this pass is not a lechi. It's simply a wall to the mavui. So Amar Rav Ada Bar Masna, I'll tell you why you don't have to put up a lechi over there. Because Chazaka ain't Adam Aniach Pesach Gadol V'nich Pesach Katan. When you are into the Reshus Harabim, no matter which side you're coming from, the vast majority of people are going to enter through the main entrance. And that's where you put the lechi. Oh, Azoi, Frekti Gemara, let's go back to the din that we learned from Rav Ami and Avasi above. What did we learn over there? That if you have on the side wall, if there's a gap, so if the gap is less than 3 tvachim, we learn lavut. But the moment the gap is 3 tvachim or more, remember that whole din? So what did they say? They said that it invalidates if it's very close to the front. If you don't have a toira of a mavui in the front, then it invalidates the toira of the lechi. Why? Why don't we say that as long as the opening from the Reshus Harabim is wider than the hole in the gap in the side, ein adam aniach, the pischa, the small one, people will only enter the big one, so it should still be a bona fide good mavui. Answers the Gemara, no. The case that we learned above of Rav Ami and Avasi is that if there is a gap in the wall of the mavui, in the side wall of the mavui, then when people are in the Reshus Harabim, they're gonna benefit a shortcut if they go through the side. Whenever a person benefits by taking a narrower entrance, but it's a shortcut, he'll use that entrance, which is why in certain times it's mevatel the opening lechi or the koira. Over here, in the case of Rabbi Yehuda, everything is in the front. Everything is in the front. You're standing on the street. The only question is, are you going to enter over here or are you going to enter over here? There we go by the klal, you enter the big one. They read it inside. There's a benefit of a shortcut. But all right. Now we don't need any pictures, but we need to have in our heads the rules that we were learning about parutz parutz. Do we combine 2 walls together to create a oimen rumal parutz? All of that is going to play itself out in the last shtickle of Daf Yud Amud Beis. It's mamash how beautiful. We're going mamash me'inyan le'inyan. We're going to be speaking about tumas oil. And as we have learned many times, that a corpse is not only metama b'mago b'masa, it's metama b'oil. Really in halacha, there are 3 types of oil. Oil can mean that the corpse went over me, or went over Apsakeli, or I went over the corpse. I jumped over a kaven. I was mahil ala kaven. Or we're going to learn about the 3rd type of oil. I'm on the ground, right? The corpse is on the ground, but we are both under the same oil. We are both under the same roof. How large or little does the roof have to be for it to be an oil? 1 tefach. So if there's a covering that is partially covering a corpse and partially covering me, or partially covering a keli, if that oil, if that roof is less than a tefach, it's not an oil. So now we're going to be speaking about, I know it's a funny example, but it's a practical example. We're going to be speaking about a toilet seat, right? A latrine seat. What's the latrine seat? You have a little bit of oimid on one side. There is oimid, there is substance on the other side, but there's a hole in the middle. There's parutz in the middle. So when do you say that you combine the right and the left, even though there is space in the middle? and it's considered a bona fide oil. That's the issue that we're speaking about. So Tanan Hassan, we learned over there in Kalim. Oir ha'asla, as we'll see, the asla, they used to have some sort of double leather straps. The leather strap was like a side of the toilet seat now. If you have the oir ha'asla, there's a leather strap on one side, and there's a leather strap on the other side. And v'cholol shaloi, and there's an opening in the middle. Says the Mishnah, they are mitzdarfen. You combine them all together, and you consider all of that to be considered a filled-in tefach, and therefore, if that is over a corpse and something else, something that could be mekabel tuma, then it's going to be metame. It's going to allow the mace to pass, to convey the tuma bituma soil. And to clarify, what's this oir ha'asla? It's oir kisoy shel beis hakisei. It's a latrine seat. And we wanted to know, hold on, how thick is the leather strap and how wide is the hole? Because here we're going to also say ultimately that if it's going to be parutz neruba al ha'omed, if there's more gap than leather strap, then we won't combine it to be a tefach. So we have two versions, and we're going to debate whether these two versions are arguing or not. Kiyal said Avdimi, when he came back from Eretz Yisrael, and he came with a measurement for how large the straps versus how large the hole, he said that etzba'ayim mikan, the etzba'ayim mikan, the etzba'ayim revach be'emtza. He's speaking about a tefach that's comprised of 6 finger widths, as we'll explain in a moment, but let's go with the number 6. So he's saying it's 2 where there's a strap, 2 which is the same size of a chalul, and then you have 2 on the other side, that's a strap. Ki also Ravin, when Ravin came from Eretz Yisrael, he came with a 4-finger breadth tefach. And how did he divide the 4 fingers? Etzba umechza mikan, a finger and a half on one side. The etzba umechza mikan, and the etzba revach be'emtza. So 1.5 and 1.5, and 1 is 4. So now, first of all, Amar Abaye, Lerabdimi, mi piligisu. Now that we have Ravins, is Ravin really coming, arguing with you? She says, no, he's not arguing with me. He understood originally that maybe there's an argument as to how many finger breadths do you need to make a tefach. That for sure, but there's no argument. When you're speaking about large fingers, which halachically, whenever we speak about a halachic connected to a finger breadth, it's the width of a thumb. A tefach is 4 of these. So he's beginning with 4. When he spoke about a tefach made out of 6 finger breadths, is if you are using all the other fingers, the zutrasa with the smaller fingers, it's the same size of a tefach. But it's not so pashit. Because if the 4 and the 6 really is the same size, why did he say 1.5, 1.5, and 1? Why did he say 2, 2, and 2? Let me explain to you how there might be a difference. Amalei Abaye says, no, I disagree with you. Lo A, which the M is, you do argue, there is an afkamina. And that is, if you have, my friends, 2 and 2 and 2, I know that if you add both sides together, it's 4 fingers closed and 2 fingers open. But do you add them together? You don't have in any single place oimed meruba ala paretz. So maybe the reason why he used the 1.5 of closed, 1 open, 1.5 closed, is because he holds you have to have oimed meruba ala paretz. You don't combine them. You came ahead and they said no, 2, 2, and 2. You're fine because you do combine the 2 and the 2. You have 4 oimed over the 2 paretz. However, that's why you came ahead with 2, 2, 2. Have a oimed mishnei ruchais, which is why it does combine. You hold it combines. And Ravin, the reason why Ravin spoke about the 1.5, 1, and 1.5 is because we don't combine both sides. So therefore, he needed to speak about a scenario that the Mishnah and Kalim is that each side of the leather strap in itself is larger than the gap. And he goes further. Let's go. Even if Ravin is going to stick to his 4 fingers, why did he say 1.5? 1.5 versus 1. Why didn't he say Ravin Hachi by Lanemer? Etzbo Shlish Mikan. You could have made you make 2, 2, 2. He could have made 1 1/3, 1 1/3, and 1 1/3. Again, more or less 4. Right? A third, 1.333. It comes out to 4. The fact that he didn't give this example is that he would not agree that would be kosher, because he argues with you. He holds that you have to have the oimid in itself before you combine it has to be bigger than the gaps. Then, guys, then there's a sum total. Then there's how much is their sum total? The sum total of the closed has to be bigger than the sum total of the gaps. That's another detail of oimid merubal aparutz. But also this detail that if you have one area, that this area itself is not larger than the gap, it's a problem. The LMI, so now Avdimi responds to Abaya. Oh, so what's means to? Okay, that we do argue. So let me ask you something. Lididi, why did I come back? No, he didn't make this up. He came back from Eretz Yisrael that he was taught 2, 2, and 2. But why didn't I come back and say Etzba u'shnei shalishim mikam, ve'etzba u'shnei shalishim mikam, ve'etzba'ayim u'shnei shalishim revach be'emsa? Right? Why didn't I say 2 2/3? I'm sorry, 1 2/3, 2 2/3, 1 2/3, which is a much bigger chiddush. Why is this a bigger chiddush? Because if I could have come to the same sum total number, but here each side that's oimid is even smaller than the parutz. If you're saying that my numbering 2, 2, 2 is based on the side that holds that you can combine two sides to make a oimid merubal parutz, then I should have said a bigger chiddush. Even if every strap itself is narrower, is smaller than the parutz, right? 1 1/3 is less than 2 2/3. But you know what? 1 2/3 and 1 2/3 together is bigger than 2 2/3. And why didn't I come along with that? Is Zachariah says that Avdimi, I accept you, Abaya, that there is an argument. Elamah, it's not the way you're saying it. Because again, I should have given the scenario where each oimid is smaller than the parutz. I accept that the fact that my Messiah was 2, 2, and 2, but it wasn't that I hold that you combine 2 oimids and together, if it's bigger than the parutz, it's good. No, because then I would have given the case of 1 2/3 with a gap of 2 2/3, with only 1 2/3 combining, it's bigger. It's not good. The question is the parutz ke'oimid, which is 2, 2, 2. In other words, there is a machlokes. Well, what's the machlokes? If every piece of oimid is less than the parutz, it's invalidated. But if it's the same size, I hold that it's good. Why is it good? Because you don't have parutz merubal oimid, together with the fact that if you take two sides, 2 and 2 is 4 oimid. The whole is only 2. So sum total, you have more closed than open. Each individual piece, no individual piece that's oimid is smaller than the parutz. For me, it's good. But the Ravin, that also holds it's not good. Ravin needs for every oimid to be merubal parutz. So that's why he gives the case of 1.5 amud, 1.5 oimid, and only 1, that's parutz. Gavaldik. All right, Chevra, we're by the 2 dots. In Mirz Hashem, to be continued. Guys, there's just 2 more days of a relatively large amount of pictures needed. But I'm telling you, whoever has an opportunity, maybe you have all these kitzurim, to chazer the few daf that we learned this week, the klalim, we got the yisoid of ERUVIN. And even the technical part over it is already behind us. Chaval, but it's already behind us from here. It's mamash, it gets easier and easier with the help of Hashem. A good Shabbos, guys, in Mirz Hashem, Sunday at 6.
Rabbi,
Yes.
extrapolate.
Extrapolate, yes.
Extrapolate.